Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. I'm recording this about a 30-minute walk from Masjid Nabawi in Medina. Being there, I saw an abnormally large crowd, and it somewhat reminded me of the day that we fear. Somewhat reminded me of Judgment Day. That's a day that will be crowded. That's a day that we're going to look at, and we're going to see a lot of people we know and people we don't. It's not a laughing matter. That day will be so serious and fearful for all of us that we will wake up out of the graves naked, dusty, thirsty, hair disheveled, in a mess. And despite our nakedness, the men and women will be too afraid to look at each other. But one of the most frightening things is not only going to be the sight of hell, because it's going to be brought forth for everybody to be able to get a look at it, but it will also be when we start to get reminded of the wrong things that we not only did, but thought we got away with, and then on top of that, forgot. So imagine that. And then you start thinking, what else did I forget? And when you start to deny that you did these things that the angels recorded, and you're shown what you did, you and I will begin to lie and deny, and our mouths will be sealed shut, and the hands and feet will begin to speak on their own and testify against us. The tongue will talk, but not the mouth. The tongue will simply say, yeah, I said this. Or rather, he said this. He used me to say this. She used me to say this. And things we said that we thought were of no consequence will be of consequence. Many of us will be shocked to even be back out of the grave again in a situation like this. That will be surprising enough for us. Imagine yourself being suspended over the sun itself. And if you are dropped, you can't fly away. There's nothing you can do but fall into it. And that's what it's like. When the Freaknic documentary was announced that it would be coming out, you began to see something similar. You began to see that many women knew their goose is cooked. They were recorded, video recorded on camcorders that since then made their ways to DVDs, MP4s. And other media. And now Uncle Luke has the footage. And walaikum salam. When he announced that this was coming out with never before seen footage, just stop and think and imagine what this means for a lot of these broads. I would say, well, what does it mean for these guys too? But the thing is that for one, we don't think that guys could do much, let alone get away with much. We've had to learn this early on. Men don't get that. How many men really could do all of the indulging? You probably, and one of the things that probably will be shown in these videos is how few guys were actually getting up in the cheeks or clapping the cheeks of many women. I mean, it was called Freaknic even back then. You notice that there's many women that are coming out ahead of this and trying to say, let's not do this. Some of us done become church deacons and everything else. And one lady had the nerve to sit up to talk about some Jesus be offense. Why? Why should he? I'm all for forgiveness when people actually sincerely repent. Hell, I've had to do that. But why should an innocent Messiah be a fence around sinful women who really only just don't want to face the music of what they've done? Whose main reason for engaging in the things in which they engaged wasn't even human weakness, it wasn't even lust. It was simply because they figured that most men were too nice to deserve them in an unspoiled state and nothing else. Contempt for you and me, gentlemen, has a hell of a lot more to do with a lot of their decisions. I mean, there was the lust for the guys with whom they chose to engage, but there was also a contempt for most of us. There was that too. Why can't you be more like them? If more of us were like those guys, they would just eliminate many of those guys. And now, because it's been announced, many of them are trying to come out. I've seen maybe 3 videos in which they're trying to talk about this, and not one of them is getting up and saying, you know what, this had to come out one day. This needs to be shown. It must be, because the unattainability of many of these women is not for the right reason. It's for the wrong reason. That's why I don't have sympathy for them. It is not the unattainability that we know about many of them has nothing to do with chastity. It has nothing to do with waiting on the right one. It has everything to do with ego. And lack of appreciation for normal men. It has everything to do with that. And that's why I don't have respect for them anymore. Should I? Yeah, I'm sure I should. Why would I, though? I could tell you now that there hasn't come a point ever where I've said to one of them, listen, you know what you need to do is you need to start underappreciating these men. You need to be unattainable just because these guys are normal, because they're men. That was never one of my messages when I was a Christian, or when I was undecided, or when I became Muslim. In the end, it has simply come down to what we have seen is unattainability for the wrong reasons. And then still being too easy for the same few dudes. Competing for them, being able to compete, and now this is about to be exposed. Pastors' wives, heads of usher boards and deaconess boards, women who have turned down multiple men for promotions, loans, anything of value. They're about to be exposed. They had all these no's to say above and below the waist, and here they were with camcorders on. Sometimes they didn't know they were being recorded. Other times they knew they were being recorded, and best believe somebody's going to come out and try to sue Uncle Luke because they got exposed on camera, even for what they did outdoors in the public in broad mother cuss word daylight. Not because of any laws that were broken, but because they weren't allowed to do wrong and get away with it. Because accountability, we're going to continue to see, is their weak point. And on Judgment Day, the real Judgment Day, we're going to see the lack of accountability on the part of the human species. But right now, in today's time, you are beginning to see why it is that we have a hadith that the majority of hell's inhabitants are going to be women. Number one, the majority of adults have been women. Number two, we see the way that they duck and dodge accountability right now in this life. And we're lately beginning to see that even when they're Muslim, just ducking and dodging. Anything but admitting you have a valid point. I've had to turn around and tell good women at times, hey, you know, your problem is you don't listen. I've had to say this to them. What you think bad women are going to be like? And they're encouraged to be this way. Taking accountability with each other, well, I mean, that's a difficult thing for them to do. But taking accountability in the face of men and for what they've done to men or against a man is darn near impossible, especially in the West, because they're socialized to never do it. They're socialized that it is never their fault when they do something and it's to the dislike of a man. That's how they're trained. They're taught this. They're told this. There is no guilt when it comes to men. Whatever they do when it comes to us, they were right for doing it. So what? They'll do it again. Whoop-de-doo. But when it comes down to what they do to each other, there's a bit more accountability. And when it comes down, in the end, when it comes down to what they will do to the men that are normal, the men they marry, or the men they can marry, and then they do choose to marry, well, that's when they really start ducking and dodging. They have more accountability when they're dealing with a Dan Balzerian than when they're dealing with a regular one like you or me. In any case, this Freaknic is like a reminder for us of the day to come. You're going to have women standing up and saying, that ain't me. My whole church was sitting up saying that's me and that ain't me. And then somebody's going to say, well, can you show any receipts or anything to show that you were not even in Atlanta at that time? And they're going to fail. And that's the least of it. The best of them are going to be the ones to deny that that's them, but can't show any evidence that it's somebody else, that it wasn't them. And granted, you know what? I wouldn't know. But that's the best of them. The best of them aren't going to be the ones that stand up and say, look, you know what? Let me just be honest with you. You know what? That was me. I was wilding. No. And while, you know what, there are going to be guys in these videos too doing things that are both legal and illegal, but certainly immoral. The thing is that the guys ain't going to get away with it. And ain't nobody going to even let the guys speak in their defense. And if you look like one of the guys that did it, but women dislike you, then they're going to find that all the more reason to blame you, even if it wasn't you. Anyway. We've seen this play out before, and it's going to be interesting to see this play out again. But let this be a reminder to us that for all of us, we're going to come across a day in which we're going to be in really, really, really bad shape. And if we start lying and ducking and dodging and evading accountability, similar to these videotapes that are going to be shown, the footage that is going to be shown, our own body parts will begin to speak against us while our mouths are sealed shut so that we can't lie. We will not be allowed to lie. And that's the scariest part of all. And this will be shown, these things will be shown in front of the crowd. Much like this footage that's about to be shown. Thank you all for listening, as always. I hope this benefits. Black heart, black mind, black out, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual, non-select, male power just because they don't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Thank you for flying with me again on Jet Black Airways, where jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with me till the wings and the wheels fall off this mother cuss word. Gender justice forever.